Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. The expression Black Lives Matter is a rallying concept, a rallying cry for the struggle against specific aspects of racism and injustice in America. The expression, the concept, All Lives Matter, emerged as a response used to, well, to put it honestly, counter the expression Black Lives Matter. Although there are those, of course, who will defend All Lives Matter. And so let's consider why someone would say, in response to Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, and to see if this is a reasonable response, that it's the right thing to say. So, being a philosopher, of course, I'm going to use an argument by analogy. That's when, of course, you compare, two things to say because they're alike in certain ways, they're alike in this other way. So, on to the analogy. Now, imagine you're out for a walk, let's say pre-pandemic, or in hopefully a better future post-pandemic, and you encounter a group of people ready to run a 5K. You ask, hey, what is this 5K for? And people around say, oh, we're running to benefit cancer patients. And you think, well, I'm opposed to cancer. I support cancer patients, so I'll sign up for this. And you go up to sign up, and you're talking, and the race director, sees you and comes over and says, hey, thank you for signing up. Cancer patients face some of the greatest obstacles and challenges among patients, and we're trying to address these. Cancer patients' lives matter. So, how would you respond? Would you angrily say, all patients' lives matter? What if someone else responded with that assertion? Would you post in response to concerns about cancer patients? Would you post on Facebook, all patients' lives matter? Would you tweet in response to attempts to address the needs and challenges of cancer patients with all patients' lives matter? I would think not. I'm sure that you'd get that raising awareness of and providing support for cancer patients is not a threat. So why do people respond to Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter? What is the motivation? And also, what is the sort of strategy behind this? Now, one response is what could be called the inclusive response, which is that all lives matter, and this is nothing bad because all lives include Black lives. And on the face of it, that seems good. But when someone says all lives matter, it seems really hard to say to them, you're wrong, because it seemed like you're saying that all lives don't matter. So it is a nice thing to say that all lives matter, but it also can be a rhetorical move. To illustrate, going with our analogy, suppose, again, going back to that example, and someone, puts on Facebook or Twitter, cancer patients' lives matter. And someone responds back, all patients include cancer patients. Well, we would think that would be, kind of a weird thing to do, because there would be sort of an implied hostility there, that somehow that focus on the needs of cancer patients would be wrong or mistaken. And we generally don't see when there's like a 5K for, cancer awareness to raise money, say for breast cancer, or someone posts on Facebook or Twitter about raising money for cancer, people don't leap in and immediately start saying, all patients matter, why you're talking about cancer patients. And so the inclusive response, on one hand, seems very nice. All people matter. But there does seem to be a hostility to it, trying to essentially say that someone is wrong to talk about, say, specifically Black Lives Matter, or, going with the analogy, that cancer patients would matter. And again, it's instructive to kind of think about, why don't people attack other people when they focus, say, on cancer patients? Why not? And the answer, one might imagine, would be fairly clear. Now, in addition to the inclusion response, there's also what could be called the exclusion response. And this is another tack. The all lives matter first approach is, when I say all lives matter, it's a nice thing. I want to include everybody. The exclusion response is essentially trying to say that Black Lives Matter is up to something. So here's kind of how the reason would go. When Black Lives Matter is said, what people interpret it as is only Black Lives Matter, which would seem to entail that other lives do not matter. Now, some people might honestly interpret the claim this way. They might not be just engaged in some sort of, clear, rhetorical tactic. They may really believe this, that every time someone says Black Lives Matter, what they hear is other lives, their lives, don't matter. But is that a plausible interpretation? Are the people who say Black Lives Matter, are they saying to you, assuming you're not a Black American, are they saying to you that your life does not matter? Well, let's go to the analogy. Suppose, going to go back to that 5K, and you're talking to the race director, and they say, cancer patients' lives matter. Is it plausible to interpret their words as only cancer patients' lives matter, entailing that other patients' lives do not matter? Now again, if you go to a 5K, to benefit cancer patients, who would say, to the race director, you're saying that other patients' lives do not matter? Hard to imagine anyone would say that. So why do people do this in the case of Black Lives Matter? Now, there's also the fact that people in Black Lives Matter and their supporters that are members of the group, they make it pretty clear that they value all lives. In fact, they've had to make, signs saying, Black Lives Matter, but yes, of course, all lives matter too. We're not denying this. It's kind of come to that where you have to sort of put on your sign that when you say, Black Lives Matter, you're not denying the value of other lives. This is fine. Why? I don't mean the sign thing, but you're saying that expressing a particular concern. So just as a person can have a special concern about cancer patients, can still value other patients, value their lives, likewise, someone could say Black Lives Matter and obviously still value all lives. There's no contradiction there. Unless, of course, there's some lying going on, which leads us to the liar response. Now, when people say all lives matter, one possible implication is this, that Black Lives Matter is effectively lying or exaggerating, that Black Americans face no unusual challenges. Because kind of the idea, in part, behind putting forth the claim Black Lives Matter is to note that there are special challenges, injustice, and problems that are faced by Black Americans. It's not the claim that no one else faces injustice, oppression, or challenges. It's that there are ones that are, more extreme in general, and there are some unusual challenges. And so one response would be to say, well, all lives matter, which in a sense is coded that Black Americans really face no unusual challenges. Everyone faces challenges and problems. And again, on one hand, it's true. For almost everybody who's not super powerful and super rich, every day is a challenge. Sometimes every day is a tragedy. But that does not mean that Black Americans face no unusual challenges. So, again, let's go with our analogy. So suppose in response to the assertion that cancer patients' lives matter, someone said all patient lives matter. And their implication is that people who are bringing attention to cancer are somehow lying or exaggerating, that cancer patients face no unusual challenges. Well, there seem to be a couple obvious replies. Again, one, this doesn't seem to be true, because cancer patients do face unusual challenges. And again, it's not that they're the only ones to face challenges. There are many, illnesses that afflict people that can be as dangerous and sometimes more so than cancer. That's true. But this would be, it would not be shown that cancer patients face no unusual challenges by asserting that all patient lives matter. And we don't think that when people say cancer patients, lives matter, that they're lying, that they're exaggerating. Now let's go to, worst case scenario. Suppose that it is true, for the sake of, the argument, that in the case of Black Americans, they face no unusual challenges. Every day is a tragedy for everybody. Everybody faces roughly exactly the same problems. And that it's true for cancer patients. They face no unusual challenges. They face the same challenges as all other patients. Even if this were true, which it totally isn't, this would not discredit the claim that Black Lives Matter any more than it would discredit the claim that cancer patients' lives matter. We accept focusing on specific issues as a practical need. For example, suppose you're at a town meeting and you're discussing the main street of your town, which is full of potholes and a wreck, and someone says we need to fix our road. We need to fix this road. No one's going to jump up and yell, all roads need fixing, as a response to somehow show that Main Street faces no unusual challenges. That would be weird. Now, of course, they might say that all roads need fixing in the sense that the infrastructure is terrible in the United States, and that claim is, in a way, true. But it wouldn't be a counter against fixing Main Street. You wouldn't say we don't need to fix Main Street because all roads need fixing. Now, the next response is the red herring response. The red herring is a rhetorical technique used to divert attention from the original issue being discussed. So when someone says Black Lives Matter, they're trying to focus attention on unusual challenges faced by Black Americans. And when someone throws out all lives matter, this can be a technique to distract attention from that issue. And what they're in effect trying to do is this, to get people to ignore the problems faced by Black Americans as a rhetorical technique. Now again, going with the patient analogy, suppose someone says cancer patients' lives matter, and they're listing special challenges, unusual challenges faced by cancer patients. The cost, etc., the insurance running out, and someone shouts at them, all patients' lives matter. As a red herring, that would be to try to ignore the problems faced by cancer patients. So how do you tell if someone's doing a red herring? Well, basically the approach is this. If someone really does think that all lives matter, then they would act on that. They would do something. So if someone, going back to the cancer patient analogy, if someone truly thinks that all patient lives matter, they would do something about the challenges faced by everybody. So what should be done with this all lives matter thing? Well, here's the thing. If someone really, really, really believes that all lives matter, and every time they, tweet it or Facebook it or meme it or yell it in response to Black Lives Matter, don't just say it and tweet it and, meme it. Do something. Act on that principle. Show that all lives do really matter. Do something. And this would, of course, include that if all lives do matter, then this would entail supporting Black Lives Matter. And so simply tweeting in response, angrily tweeting or Facebooking or memeing, is not showing that all lives matter. It's just, by itself, is just an attempt to show that one doesn't think, perhaps, that Black Lives Matter. And so, in conclusion, if all lives do truly matter, then do something.